The world of Pokemon is vast and filled with, at the time of this writing, no fewer than 898 Pokemon. This, of course, raises a question. Which one is the best one? You might call this an impossible question, but really it's a matter of definition. What makes one Pokemon better than another? For our purposes today, in order to provide an objective metric, we will consider a Pokemon better than another if it's more difficult to obtain. The best Pokemon, again, for our purposes here today, is the Pokemon you can show off and everyone will be like, wow, how'd you get that? Hello world, my name is Atticus, and welcome to being the very best, like no one ever was. First, let's establish some ground rules. I won't be looking at remakes, so when I say generation, I'm referring to the set of new games that came out in that gen. Blue, red, yellow, gold, silver, crystal, and so on. While the third versions are fair game, black 2, white 2, and use some are not. If it turns out everything is equal, I'll give priority to version exclusives, but I don't expect the most impressive Pokemon to be stuffed away in half a gen. Also, I'll only be looking at local dex entries. A bit arbitrary, but there are so many numbers. I'll be evaluating every evolutionary line at every game based on how easy it is to obtain the first stage, and if there's any difficulty getting to the last stage aside from leveling. After all, a level 41 Pokemon is more impressive than a level 41. So we'll be assuming all of these Pokemon are level 100. Additionally, these hypothetical level 100 Pokemon will be shiny, because why not? This is mostly a non-issue within generations, but it does mean the rarest Pokemon overall will almost definitely come from Gens 2 through 5, as those had the lowest shiny rates. And finally, if you're placing bets on the rarest, most impressive Pokemon, I would advise you not to pick a legendary, or any Pokemon that has an overworld sprite, since those are a fair bit easier to shiny hunt. Here's a little behind the scenes on our proprietary and objectively correct algorithm. We look at whether a Pokemon has a fixed encounter, the catch rate, and the best possible encounter rate, the gender ratio, and finally the evolutionary requirements. Because we've gone through all the trouble of obtaining all this data for every single Pokemon, I figured it'd be neat to look at a few more stats on the local dexes. We all like numbers here, right? For example, what's the likelihood that you can find any Pokemon you want? In Gen 1, the average encounter rate is 47.6%, so if you know all the optimal places to hunt for a Pokemon, you've got about a 50% chance of finding it. Flip a coin. If it's heads, you've got your Pokemon. If it's tails, you're in the wrong game. The overall gender ratio is 55 male to 45 female. The most complicated evolution method is trading a Pokemon with another player, something you have to do for 4 evolutionary lines. There are 25 Pokemon that don't evolve and 79 total evolutionary lines in this game. Speaking of 79, Zubat has a 79% encounter rate, and the highest possible catch rate of 43.9%. Poliwag, Tentacool, Goldeen, and Magikarp all have 100% encounter rates, and you can even buy a Magikarp from a guy, making them the most common Pokemon of this generation, with Magikarp reigning supreme. Tentacool has the lowest catch rate of these at 35.2%, making it the coolest kid in this bunch. Diglett, despite having an entire tunnel named after it, does not have a 100% encounter rate, and instead comes in at just 95%. Granted, the other 5% goes to the evolution. Those are some of the most common, so here are the runner-ups for best. Farfetch'd and Lickitung both have a mere 5% encounter rate, but both of them have trade options. A Spearow for Farfetch'd and a Slowbro for Lickitung, making them only slightly rarer than those two. Pinsir and Scyther have a 4% encounter rate, but are possible prizes from the Celadon Game Corner. Finally, Mr. Mime, Jynx, Lapras, Eevee, and Porygon cannot be encountered in the wild, but each is still relatively easy to obtain. Trade an Abra or Clefairy for Mr. Mime, trade a Poliwhirl for Jynx, receive Lapras and Eevee as gifts, and finally win Porygon from the Game Corner as the most expensive prize. Mew also cannot be encountered in the wild, and indeed cannot be encountered in the game outside of events or glitches. Mew does not win, because if you have it, you either went to the event, in which case it was guaranteed, or you hacked it in, which doesn't count. And that leaves us with the most impressive Pokemon, Electabuzz, coming in with just a 5% encounter rate and a pretty low catch rate at 11.9. Specifically a female Electabuzz, since they have a 75-25 ratio. On to Gen 2. This one introduced 100 new Pokemon and has a total of 126 evolutionary lines. Our averages this time is 43.8%, a bit lower but still respectable. The male-female ratio is 52-48, and the most complicated evolution method is trading while a Pokemon holds a specific item. There's an honorable mention for Tyrogue's evolution being determined by its stats when it evolves, which makes it complicated to get a specific Hitmon, but the evolutionary method is still technically leveling. This generation also introduced friendship evolutions, where a Pokemon has to like you enough before evolving when it levels up. It's definitely more complicated than just leveling, but it's still pretty similar. Just keep the Pokemon in your party, use the nice drugs, and don't let it die. Using a friendship ball or hatching a Pokemon from an egg will start you off with a higher base friendship, and in Crystal, if you level a Pokemon up in the same area where you initially caught it, you'll get more friendship than usual. Enough with the distractions though. What's the least rare? The shiny Gyarados, easy. But while not a legendary or a starter, it still has an overworld sprite, so what about random encounters? That goes to Rattata, Unknown, Tentacool, and Remoraid, who all have 100% encounter rates. Tangela has a 95% encounter rate, despite only having 10 in the first generation. And it's not a Johto route where you find Tangela. What happened in the years between these two generations to cause such an increase in the Tangela population? What is Tangela? Outside of the 4 100% encounter rates, there are 8 other Pokemon with 100% encounter rates, though these are gift Pokemon. Truly, this is a great generation for shiny-only runs. One last thing of note is that you receive an odd egg at some point, which will hatch into one of the new baby Pokemon released with this generation. These Pokemon evolve into Pokemon introduced in the previous generation, like Igglybuff to Jigglypuff, or Cleffa to Clefairy. The Pokemon that hatches from the odd egg has a greater chance to be shiny than normal, and since those two Pokemon I just mentioned are the most likely Pokemon to hatch from the odd egg, those are your two least rare shiny Pokemon in this generation that isn't a set encounter. Our runner-ups include Ditto, Scyther, Pinsir, Tauros, Miltank, Skarmory, and Kangaskhan, each with just 5% encounter rates and varying ease of catch rates, but the rarest among them is a shiny Blissey. Chansey, the previous form, has an 8.8% catch rate and an abysmal 1% encounter rate. Imagine trying to get a shiny one of them. Enough of those harrowing thoughts, though. What about Gen 3? Hoenn introduced 135 new Pokemon to the games and has 105 evolutionary lines available in its local dex. Those Pokemon have an average 47% encounter rate, just like Gen 1, and a 52-48 gender ratio, just like Gen 2. The most complicated evolutionary tactic this time goes to Phoebus, who, unlike anyone else so far, only evolves when its beauty stat is high enough. This, in itself, is not necessarily difficult. You've just got to stuff the fish full of Pokeblocks and Poffins, but it's certainly not something that is likely to happen accidentally. Perhaps I should call this category the strangest evolution. That might be more fitting. They changed it in Gen 5 so that Phoebus evolved when you stole the Rainbow Fish's scale and then sent Phoebus off as a patsy. The most common Pokemon this generation are Whimsir, Magikarp, who is 3 for 3 in guaranteed encounters, Zubat, Carvanha, Wailmer, Barboach, Corphish, Duskull, Shuppet, and Psyduck. They all have 100% encounter rates, and Tentacool and Azurill have 99%. The other 1% goes to the evolution, so we'll count them too. That's 12 lines, and 8 of them are water types. There really is a lot of water in this game. Slackoth, Pichu, Heracross, and Pinsir have 5% encounter rates, and technically you can't find Pichu, only Pikachu, which is good, but not good enough. Tropius has 9%, which isn't better, but is neat, and Absol has 8%. Skarmory and Relicanth also have 5% encounter rates and a slim 7.7% catch rate, which makes them a definite contender. Ralts has just 4%, but 41.3% in the catch department. Also, real quick fun fact. The catching a Pokemon tutorial is done by having the player accompany a character named Wally as he goes and catches his first Pokemon. This Pokemon is a Ralts, which is impressive enough, but this Ralts can also be shiny. To add insult to injury, if Wally catches a shiny Ralts, he replaces it with a non-shiny Ralts later. But there is a Pokemon with an even lower catch rate, Chimecho with 2%, making it the rarest Pokemon in this generation. Onwards to my personal favorite generation of Pokemon, the fourth one. I just really like the music, you know? 4 introduced 107 Pokemon, an odd number indeed, also a prime number. Fun fact, actually generations 4 and 1 both introduced a prime number of Pokemon. I don't know what to do with that information, but there it is. It also has a total of 102 evolutionary lines, our average encounter rate is 51%, the highest so far, and a gender ratio of 55 to 45. I added the gender ratios because it might be a deciding factor for rarity, and it was a set of numbers available. But the gender ratios are either 50-50, 75-25, 87.5, 12.5, or 100-0, or not applicable for some Pokemon. And most Pokemon are 50-50. Usually the 75-25 and 100-0 come in pairs, so it remains equal. One Pokemon is 75 male, 25 female, and another will be the reverse. The only exception is 87.5 to 12.5, which is the gender ratio for starter Pokemon and, like, Eevee, and is only ever 87.5 male and 12.5 female. So while I haven't crunched the numbers for the upcoming generations, it's pretty safe to assume that the overall gender ratio will be close to 50-50 but favor male Pokemon. It's neat, I guess, but doesn't bear repeating. Gen 4 introduced evolving while knowing a specific move, which might throw old hats for a loop, but the strangest evolutionary method goes to Man-type, which will only evolve if it gains a level while you have a Remoraid in your party. Imagine having to carry 2 water types around. They're the easiest to find, sure, but you gotta consider your party comp. Starting out, our most common Pokemon is, you guessed it, Magikarp. After we get through all the individual generations, we'll be looking at the most and least common overall, and while I haven't crunched the numbers, I bet we all know who's going to win at least one of those titles. Our other 100% not necessarily guaranteed encounters are Ghastly, Unknown, Rotom, and... that's it. Geodude, Zubat, Psyduck, and Wooper are all north of 90, but not quite 100. Now, you may have noticed that that's not a lot of 100% encounters, despite 4 having the highest average so far, and that's because I've not included the gift Pokemon. Ignoring starters, legendaries, and the 4 already mentioned, here are all the Pokemon you can 100% get if you know what to do. Cranidos, Shieldon, Happiny, Spiritomb, Riolu, Eevee, Togepi, and Porygon for 16 evolutionary lines with encounter rates north of 90. Granted, Spiritomb is very difficult to get. I've not gotten it before. But throw in the starters and legendaries and that's 29 out of 102 evolutionary lines, which will hopefully make our rare Pokemon all the more impressive. This time we have only 2 Pokemon with encounter rates in the single digits. One is Heracross at 3.5% and the other is our winner, Munchlax at 1, making Shiny Snorlax the rarest Pokemon of this generation. Both of these Pokemon can only be found via Honeytree, which will hopefully help, but I doubt it will help much. Gen 5 came out when I was in that phase where you think you're too cool for Pokemon, so I'm not terribly familiar with it. But here's a pretty cool fact about it. This gen is the first gen since the original games to feature a cast of entirely new Pokemon in its local dex. It introduced 156 new Pokemon, outdoing Red and Blue and taking the title of the generation which introduced the most Pokemon. It has 82 evolutionary lines, which is just a touch more than Gen 1, and an average encounter rate of 53, outdoing all of its seniors. That makes sense. They made a bunch of new Pokemon and they wanted to be sure you met them. They toned down the evolution techniques. There's not even a level with a specific move. There is, however, Karrablast and Shelmet. These two are trade evolution Pokemon, with the caveat that you have to trade them for each other. A Shelmet traded with a Scyther holding a Metal Coat will net a Skeezor, but not an Excelgor. Additionally, if even one of them is holding an Everstone, the item a Pokemon holds if you don't want it to evolve, neither Pokemon will evolve after the trade. Our least rare Pokemon are Pansage, Panpour, Pansear, Basculin, Drillbur, Ardino, Ducklet, Foongus, Frillish, Litwick, Golett, and Stunfisk, keeping up the pattern of water and ghost types being some of the easiest to find. No Magikarp here, but that's only because it doesn't appear in the local dex. Have no worries though, once you get the national dex you can buy a Magikarp from someone for the low price of 500 Pokéyen. Alomomola has a 95% encounter rate and is the only Pokemon in the 90s for this generation. Our not quite rare Pokemon are Tyno at 8% and Cryogonal, our winner, at 5%. Remember Cryogonal? I sure don't. Gen 6 has the least amount of new Pokemon to date, coming in at only 72, but it has a whopping 224 evolutionary lines across its 3 local dexes. I will not be evaluating each of them individually, but will instead be treating them as a single dex. The average encounter rate this time is 36%, so hopefully we have a more interesting contest for rarest. We'll see. For strangest evolution, all the hits are back. We've got Karrablast and Shelmet needing to be traded with each other, we've got Mantike needing a Remoraid, and an easier version of that evolution with Pancham needing a Dark type in general to be in the party. But the strangest goes to Inkay, who will only evolve if you hold the system upside down once it levels sometime after level 30. You have to hold the game system upside down. I figured you probably wouldn't accidentally evolve Phoebus, but it could definitely happen. You see this goofy fish and you're like, I'm gonna make you the prettiest girl at the ball, and then much to your surprise you get Melodic. There is no way someone accidentally evolves Inkay. The only scenario is if you drop the system at the exact moment Inkay gains a level and the system is upside down long enough for it to register. If you evolved Inkay without knowing how to do it, go buy a lottery ticket right now. Anywho, before we talk about the rarity of Pokemon, here's one more fun fact about Gen 6 Pokemon. There are 23 evolutionary lines where you can't find the first stage out in the wild, and a few more where you're more likely to find the second evolution than the first. I imagine it's on account of how many Pokemon they shoved into this game. For the most common Pokemon, you'll be happy to know that Magikarp has returned, and in this game you can trade a Gyarados for a Magikarp. A trade that seems ridiculous, but does have some merit if you want a shiny Gyarados. Other than Magikarp, there's Burmy, Ladybug, Combee, Volbeat, Illumise, Munchlax, Luvdisc, Poliwag, and Rotom, which is a couple more bug Pokemon than I expected. They've never really been difficult to catch, but the catch rates are usually divided amongst the bugs. Even Durant has an encounter rate of 90%. Pichu, or Pikachu technically, has a 6% encounter rate. Dunsparce, Riolu, Plusle, Minun, Abra, Kecleon, Bagon, Tailo, Kangaskhan, Mawile, Emolga, Deden, Sableye, Pinsir, Heracross, Pachirisu, Shuckle, Ekans, Smoochum, Bonsly, Dano, and Dratini all have a 5% encounter rate, which is impressive. Cryogonal, however, wins again by having a 4% encounter rate instead. Generation 7 introduced 88 Pokemon and has 154 evolutionary lines. I do appreciate scaling back to a more manageable number. The average encounter rate is 41%, and the strangest evolution goes to Goomy, who only evolves if it's raining. I feel like every time they introduce a bonkers evolution, they tone down the next local dex, because Goomy is not new to this generation. For our most common, we have Yungoos, Rattata, Crabrawler, Diglett, Wishy-Washy, Fomantis, and Wimpod, all at 100% encounter rates. No Magikarp this time, it only has a 79% encounter rate. Truly, Gen 7 tried to shake up the Pokemon formula. Other than that, Wailmer has a 90% encounter rate, so a strong water-type showing as usual. For the rarest, there's actually a 5-way tie for the rarest Pokemon of this generation. Pichu, Munchlax, Comfey, Phoebus, and Stuffle all have 5% encounter rates, just like our tied top 5, but they all have lower catch rates. We almost had a single winner, Kangaskhan, at a 1% encounter rate on its own, but it's a possible SOS ally for Cubchoo, who has a 24% encounter rate, so Kangaskhan was eliminated from the running. Instead, we have Oranguru, Passimian, Mimikyu, Lapras, and Jangmo-o as our winners, the rarest Pokemon this gen, with 5% encounter rates and 11.9% catch rates. I said I didn't expect to rely on version exclusives to tiebreak, but it looks like it's come to that. Oranguru and Passimian each only appear in one version, making them just a bit more rare than the other three, leaving them the ultimate winners of this generation. Last but not least, we have Gen 8, introducing 92 new Pokemon and containing a frankly alarming 294 evolutionary lines. There are 468 total evolutionary lines if my math is correct, so that's over half, 62% to be a bit more precise. Definitely the largest local dex to date. Also, now that we've reached the end of all the Pokemon that exist currently, we can fact-check Professor Rowan, who claims that 90% of Pokemon are linked to evolution. But currently that number is closer to 81%, and indeed in each generation only 80-some% of Pokemon evolve or are evolved into. The average encounter rate this time is... this can't be right. 91%! That's right, if you want a Pokemon in Sword and Shield, you can get it. This is thanks to a lovely feature called Wandering Pokemon, where in just about every area there are Pokemon that are guaranteed to be walking about depending on the weather. Just about every Pokemon in this generation wanders somewhere, or at least one member of their evolutionary line does. The strangest evolution this time goes to Yamask. To evolve Yamask, a Galarian Yamask to be specific, you first need Yamask to... Why did I write that 4 times in a row? You first need the Pokemon to take at least 49 points of damage, and note, weather effects like hail or sandstorms don't count. Once Yamask is sufficiently damaged, you walk under a specific bridge, and there you go, your Yamask is now Runerigus. It's so specific and alien to any other evolutionary method to date, it baffles me. Damage your Pokemon a bit and walk under a bridge. There you go. Because so many Pokemon have 100% encounter rates, we won't be going over the most common, that's everyone. But you'll be happy to know that Magikarp does have a 100% encounter rate. For the rare Pokemon, Corsola, Klefki, Dedenne, Skrelp, and Clauncher all have 5% encounter rates. Drampa and Turtonator have 2% encounter rate, which is the lowest in the game, but I think rarest belongs to Sirfetch'd. It's definitely the closest call to date, all three are version exclusives, but Drampa and Turtonator have a 16.6% catch rate compared to Farfetch'd 11.9%. And they don't have evolutions, whereas Farfetch'd gets a weird evolution method in this generation. To evolve a Farfetch'd, you have to land 3 critical hits in one battle. It's definitely close, but I'd be more impressed to see a shiny Sirfetch'd than a shiny Drampa or Turtonator. And that's all of the individual generations. But what about the rarest overall? The most common is Magikarp, easily. Not only is there a guaranteed shiny encounter in Gen 2, every gen in which Magikarp appears in the local dex, which is to say all of them except 5, it has an encounter rate of at least 79% and an average of 97%. The rarest Pokemon is a bit more difficult to determine, but I think it's safe to say that the rarest Pokemon appears in as few games as possible. There are about 143 evolutionary lines that only appear in a single local dex, and most of those are starters or in legendaries. Again, shiny rates were at their lowest for Gens 2 through 5, so picking only from those generations and ignoring starters and legendaries, our list of super rare Pokemon starts with Stantler. That's not a great sign. Other than that, we have Shroomish, Cacnea, Kricketot, Glameow, Blitzel, Sewaddle, Deerling, and Tynamo. Stantler has a 40% encounter rate, Shroomish has 15, Cacnea 20, Kricketot 10, Glameow 20, Blitzel 20, Sewaddle 35, Deerling 35, and Tynamo 8, making a shiny Electros the rarest Pokemon in all of Pokemon. Now go out and get shiny version of these Pokemon until Stantler is the rarest. I have been Atticus, and thank you for participating.